Welcome back to the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast, the long-awaited interview with Sepp Kuss. We get into his goals for this year, what was his hardest ever stage race, as well as some other interesting topics like what's the development pipeline like for riders in North America currently. As always, this show is supported by our show partner Zwift. We have had a hectic recording schedule the last couple of weeks with the previews and the start of the season. I'm actually about to hop on Zwift now. We just recorded the UAE team preview and we have last call, our first ever LRCP Zwift group ride this evening, 6 p.m. UK time, 7 p.m. Europe time. But if you miss it, don't worry. We have them every Tuesday throughout February at the same time. So I'm sure we'll see you there on Zwift at some point. Welcome to the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast. Sepp Kuss, one of the best climbers in the world, recently off his Tour de France stage win in Andorra, where I now also live. I remember that day, which we'll talk about in this podcast. Sepp, busy off-season. How does your off-season differ from, say, a Wout van Aert who's trying to prepare for classics? Have you still got a big block to come, or are you now into stage racing coming up in 2 weeks?
I think for me, well, first of all, thanks for having me on the show, Patrick. Yeah, I think it still feels like a few weeks away, the start of the season and everything. But I still do have quite a bit of time. I don't start till end of February with some one day races in France. And even starting then, it's still a more or less relaxed approach. So for now, I haven't thought too much about what's coming. Just getting the last good weeks of training in, and then from there, it's actually pretty busy. So
yeah, I remember I looked at last year. You did Tour of Vuelta, and you do a lot of stage racing. I swear you must have been out of home like 90% of the year, going like Dauphiné, altitude camp, Tour de France. When is your break? Do you have any break throughout the year? Is it sort of before the Dauphiné, and then once it's Dauphiné, it's just a full run of 3 months of racing?
I think last year it was, around that time, a bit before. Actually, it was in between Catalunya and Romandy last year, which was kind of a awkward time to have it. I think this year I would rather push it further back, sometime after Romandy, just to be a bit more fresh before the Tour. I mean, now that you say that, it is a lot of lot of racing and a lot of days away from home. But I think each race that I did, there was a lot of space in between. So most of that time I was home and could do the, training and just be comfortable at home. But you're right, during the time, I think it was before the Dauphiné, and then in between that race and the Tour, it was a lot of training camps and a longer stretch away.
You just mentioned that you're doing a couple of one-day races. I was looking before did you do Emilia or Lombardia? I think you did an Italian one day at the end of last year.
Last year I did Emilia and Milano Torino.
That's right. You hadn't done a one-day race, I swear, for like 2 years. Was that just the way it panned out because you needed to be often matching Primoz in stage races? And I was thinking, I was like, your best results have come on the hardest mountain days. You haven't won on like a Jebel Hafit, just 120 watts, then a 20-minute power test. Like Dauphiné stage 5, really hard. Vuelta, super hard. And Tour de France, hard multi-mountain stage. Do you think, why is it that you haven't done a lot of one-day racing? Is that something you want to do more of, or is it just, and do you think you can be good at it? Like, I know you didn't go to the Olympics, but a course like that or Lombardia, do you think you can be competitive at them because you descend well too?
I for sure I'd like to be, but I think, to answer the first question, a lot of it comes down to just the scheduling, and I think naturally I'm more of a stage race guy. whether that's a week or 3 weeks, whatever. Um, and so that was always my normal fit. And we have a lot of guys on the team that are really good for the one day races, especially the ones in the spring, which I've never done. But I think a lot of it also is, even at the beginning of a stage race, I never know exactly how I'm going to feel. I never know how to set myself up for that one day and know with a good percent chance, like, okay, I'm going to be good today. But it's for sure something I'd like to experience more. And so it's nice that I can do a bit more of that this year. But yeah, I don't know. I think, all my best results have come either later in a race or on a stage with a lot of hard climbing, which is actually funny because before, at least when I came more straight from mountain biking background, I was more of the guy that could handle a super easy day and then one effort at the end. And I think now as I've developed a bit more, it's maybe a bit more the other way around where I need a bit of a harder day, but yeah, for sure. A nice flat stage and then one 20-minute climb at the end. A few years ago would be right up my alley.
I mean, to be honest, you're still like pretty good at them. Like usually go up against Yates and Pogačar, and like Adam Yates, he isn't won a Grand Tour, but like on a 20-minute climb after an easy stage, he's actually pretty lethal on those sort of climbs. But even, were you surprised on Valdepeñas de Jaén, the stage finish there, the real like 1K 11% climb in the Vuelta, the Primoz one, when you did that lead out? Because that's one of the punchiest things I've seen you do. Was that just good timing from you? Because I know you hit the right-hand corner really fast and undercut him. Was it like really good power, or you just right place, right time, good timing?
I think for that climb, it was more just because I was at the front and could, because the corner that you're talking about, it was, if I remember correctly, it was a pretty slow speed corner, and then it's just the full accordion effect. So if I came out of that first, then that probably, I mean, it's also hard to say because I think right after I finished, or before I even finished, then Primoz came over the top of me. So it's hard to compare it when a guy like that is doing the same effort, because for him it's like double the speed.
His 3-minute power is okay, like Flesh murder record. Yeah, but did you just talk going sort of honing in on that Vuelta, and I'm thinking about that there. How much do you think, and you're one of the only riders that sort of does this, Lopez had a little bit too, where he was riding a bit for Mas, well, actually quite a lot of times for Mas, but then protecting his own GC. How hard is it, or how much did it take out of you when you're doing an effort like that? And then I presume you're still riding then as best you can to finish that I presume you didn't just stop and do 180 watts for the rest of that climb to protect your own GC. How much time does it cost, or did it cost, you think, across the 3 weeks?
It's hard to say. I mean, like you said, it's not like I finish the job and then go as easy as I can to the finish in those situations. And normally I'm far enough into the last few Ks that it's not a crazy effort to just make it to the finish at whatever speed. But I think for me, it's different because as if I know that I have a job to do that day, then my finish line is a bit shorter, if you will. So mentally it's easier because you say, okay, I do my best to this point, or to the point where I can't, follow whatever move there is that, for me to do my job, or I just do it to the best I can here and then make it. So, I think that's the difference, but yeah, it's really hard to say how much time I would lose, here and there. I mean, maybe in the end it would be the same amount of time because it's the different mental approach to the final.
Do you feel any like pressure or like anytime you ever mention I'm targeting GC at Catalonia, like Vela News or someone or an American outlet like Sepkus, next American GC, I don't know that they obviously every country wants to have like a GC hopeful, and you're the best American sort of climber and probably GC rider right now. Um, like where does that stack up for you in your priorities? And then there's the team priorities with Primoz, and Jonas for the tour, where you're like, okay, on your day you're like top 3 climber in the world, and then but then you got to do all the TT work. Like in your mind right now, where does GC rank in your like goals for this season?
For me, it ranks actually pretty high, just because I think from a motivational standpoint, that's where you get the most out of yourself, training wise, approaching the race, being focused during the race. It's for me at least, it's good to approach it that way, where I think, okay, I need to get the best out of myself at every facet of the race. And then from there, I know that in some races it's not realistic, or you have a bad day and you're not in the picture anymore. But at least from the onset, that's how I like to approach things. So for me, it's motivating to do it, but at the same time, that's not all there is in cycling. And for sure, in the US, they want the next Lance or whoever, and the cycling fans in the US also really, a GC rider is more tangible to them. That's something that's okay. Yeah, I watch the tour once a year, and I know who wins the GC, but the one day races or a stage win from the break, that's maybe not as tangible to the general audience. So
that's what we're always thinking about. Like we look at a rider like Lutsenko, and if we're doing a preview for a Grand Tour, me and Benji are like, okay, he can come 8th or 7th or something at the tour at best. But we know Lutsenko can win a stage. He won a stage in 2020 from the break. Like what's the trade-off? And for Astana and him, top 10 at the tour was like, that's what they want, almost more than, or no, much more than a stage win. Will you ride differently, do you think? Because I don't know, sometimes when you've gone for stages with a really good approach where you're like, I'm going over the stage and I'm going to put all out to actually win the stage. If you can't win the stage, you'll sort of die trying almost. Whereas you look at other riders like Kelderman or Valverde, who even Valverde sometimes rides a bit more conservatively to not go like over his limit. Will you be less aggressive, do you think, in 1 week races, particularly this year, not following moves to sort of maybe protect like a top 5 position on GC, or you still just lay it on the line like on Hafit or Volta 2000 or Pordenay, whichever it was?
No, it's a good question actually, but I think for me, that's the other thing. I don't want to lose what I like about racing just to be a GC rider. I mean, for me, to be successful as a GC rider means actually being on the podium or winning a week-long race or a 3-week race. But I would rather enjoy the race, try and win if I can, than just be there consistently. But on the other side, I think I also need to learn how to race consistently to know my limits more or less, because it's also how you win races is by riding within your limits at the right moments. So I shouldn't approach everything as if I need to win or I'm going to win. I think it's both. But at the end of the day, I don't want to change who I am as a rider or how I like to ride just to get a top 10.
I think on the team you're on as well, like you're not a team that needs the points to avoid relegation or anything like that. Actually winning races is better than coming third or second instead of third on like the UCI ranking. So on your team, that makes sense as well. I guess. So we will see Sepp Kuss GC at some point this year. All right. And the TT bike, I swear you fooled me in Romandy Prologue and Vuelta. I was like, holy fuck, he's fixed it. Like and the Romandy one was like, I think you were top 10 or something. Is it a position, like, have you been working a lot on the TT? I know Jumbo, you guys got really good expertise with it. Is that something that almost, if you fix that, you're automatically almost moving into like top elite GC contender range, like Jonas TT? Like, sure, does his improvement in the TT give you a lot of hope that you can do that as well?
Yeah, I don't know. I think the short prologues, at least those two you mentioned, like 40%, it was just uphill and on the pedals. So that definitely helped my my case. But actually, there was the first TT in the Tour this year. For me, it was okay. It was, I actually went into it and just tried to ride like fast but easy, and then I had a decent, nothing amazing, but right with a lot of the good climbers. So for me, that was a good result. The only one I've really had in a longer TT, but yeah, I don't know. I think for me, it's just so different from my climbing style, right, and my flexibility and strength. It's something I still need to work on just in general is the seated strength, the flexibility and mobility. I think that's more important than the effort itself, at least where I'm at right now. Just to be comfortable on the bike, because when I'm comfortable, then I can do my best effort. But I think that's the main limiting factor.
Right. Okay. And have they got a 3D model of you yet at the uni, or?
I think they do, actually. I remember doing some sort of scan a couple of years ago.
Okay.
But yeah. But I've done track testing a few times, which was good because it was pretty realistic, and I could feel the differences in the different position, and I definitely have all the tools I need to get better. It's just still putting in the time, getting in the experience, getting in the mental state during the race, which is also important, I think.
Yeah, and so pivoting away from TT now to a question about your peers and maybe yourself. Right now, who do you think are the top 5 climbers in the world? And that includes peak Waspakilo on like a Jebel Hafit easy stage. It includes like being able to do it after a long, hard day, like sort of Pogačar almost has no drop off after a hard day. Who do you think are the top 5?
Well, if I include Primoz and Pogačar, then,
that's it.
Those are shoo-ins. Yeah. Let's see. Lopez. Yeah, he's always good.
Underrated, I think. I think he's the best at 50 minutes to altitude. I think he's almost untouchable.
Yeah, I think, so like on the shorter ones, he's maybe not he's a bit like me, maybe just not always right there on the really short ones, but he's super strong. Yates, either one.
True, that's fine.
Yeah.
You're not putting yourself in.
I don't know. I don't know where I'd stack up.
I don't know. Like I look at
I think at the
Col
bottom
de
of
la
every time, I
Loze.
think, oh, all these guys are good. These guys are gonna do something today. Who knows who's it gonna be?
I reckon you're being a bit humble there. I reckon on like a long, hard, proper mountain stage, maybe not. Yeah, maybe not on just like a 15-minute or Milano Torino Superga effort, but like on the Tour de France ones, it depends. Like as you said, like you and Lopez, when it gets to 50 minutes and altitude, like Col de la Loze, which he won, like Jamon Etera was super long and steep.
Yeah.
Oh, was that Covadonga? I don't know which one. The one you waved to Primoz on. You improve there. But yeah, the Yateses, they kind of. But then some days, like Yates was so strong on Verifique, almost too strong for Bernal, like putting him in difficulty in a welter on stage 9. And then on Jamon Etera, which is like a steep climb, and he's like 58 kilos or something, he's struggling. So he's another. It just goes to show. Yeah. What do you think that is? Is it almost impossible to pinpoint? Like I'm sure you guys have smart sports scientists. You're always looking at the data. Is you got your feeding, dialed usually? Is there anything you can pinpoint? Is it as easy as I only slept 6 hours last night, or I slept funny, or I missed a bit on 2 days ago and then lost, like didn't refuel then? Like, do you know what it is if you have a bad day when you can only do like 5.6 for 18 or 20?
I think for the bad day, I think it's just little things building up each day to a certain point.
Okay.
At least in the later in the race, if you have a crash, maybe it's not a hard crash, but maybe it's bothering you each day, and then it leads to one point, or each day your nutrition isn't really perfect, then maybe that culminates in something. But yeah, other than that, it's hard to say. It just comes down to the individual. I mean, yeah, just speaking for myself, taking care of everything. And then, you can have a day that's not what you expected. So yeah, tough to pinpoint for sure.
Yeah, I know. Like, and then some guys are just this, like, not spectacular, but just the same, like almost every stage.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about just US focused. You came through like showing out at the Tour of Utah, American race, and Mike Woods, I know, not American, Canadian, he sort of showed himself to, I don't know if they're called Garmin Sharp or whatever they were called then, Cannondale at sort of Tour of Alberta, etc. Tour of California is gone. Tour of Utah is gone. I'm not sure what other races are gone. How does an American U23 get noticed by a world tour team now if they're not on Hagens?
Yeah, it's definitely harder. I think from the U23 side, at least the way the sport is going now, where they're scouting so much younger and at certain races, if they're in a good setup where they're getting to do races in Europe and getting noticed there, then I think for them it's still okay. But they do miss then that showcase in the US to go against the other good guys. So I think that's for the younger guys, that's the only problem. And then it's a matter of being on that a national team or Hagens Berman. And from my own side, I was never in that pipeline as much. I just my first year on the road was my last year as a U23. So I did some races in Europe with the U23 program, but they were my first races. I was nowhere in the races. It was just to see how hard it was, basically. So I think on the other side, you can come from a lot of different disciplines, and let's say you're from the US and you're doing gravel or mountain bike. That's also a big draw now for teams and recruiting. Everybody wants the next diamond to unpolished gym. So maybe they're drawing from those other outlets. So for sure, it's not dead in the US. It's just a totally different scene than in Europe. But at the end of the day, it's still, I think, most important to race in Europe.
Did you, though, you're on rally, when was it before the Tour of Utah Stage 2 second on that stage up to Snow Basin that you were already talking to World Tour teams? Or was that like you did that performance and then World Tour teams started knocking?
It was before, actually. It was in Torrey, California.
Okay.
Had a few good days there, and that was kind of the first. Well, yeah, that was the first real introduction to the team. That's where I met Grisha.
Okay.
And from there we were always talking. And actually, I think during Utah, they still weren't sure. I'd already done some testing with them. But I think the conversation started before that.
That's why as an Australian, I worry with the pandemic. The Tour Down Under hasn't happened properly at World Tour level for a couple of years. Herald Sun Tour not happening with World Tour teams. Like for the Australians, it's either be a super elite talent who's just obviously going to get a World Tour contract because of his world's performance, like Lucas Plapp or Luke Plapp, or you got to be on the track or something. But if you're just that step below, or maybe a bit of maybe you're like 22, 23.
Latecomer, yeah.
Yeah, you're not quite there yet, but you could be quite good. I worry for those guys.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's where all the hidden talent is, actually. I think it's more in that bracket than in the 17, 18-year-olds that have been training with the power meter since they were 6, For me, that's not where you want to get your talents from. It's more in this bracket where, okay, this guy, he's late to it. He was doing another sport, yada, yada. And then for that group, they need those races, those good senior races to actually get noticed, because they're not going to do a U23 race or, so I think that's the group that the absence of those races misses out on.
And it's crazy when you hear stories about how guys like might get an introduction to a World Tour team because they did well in a Strava segment, and then someone sends it to a director, and the director's like, oh, that's pretty good. Like, you bring him in for to ride with us for a week. Like, that stuff actually happens. It's not like football. It's not like, I mean, I know. Are you a big American sports fan? Like of?
Not so much. I'm a hockey guy, but
okay.
But yeah.
But like scouting in the US for football is just insane. It's a whole industry in itself. And cycling's so different.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'll give a free tip to World Tour teams. Paul Demont from Burkina Faso. Just write him down. Just write him. He's good. That guy's really good. Okay. Your hardest day in a race on the bike, a man who's won really, really hard stages. I want to know your answer because I have a guess, but I want to know what your hardest ever stage or race was.
Well, I can think of a lot of hard days where I didn't do well at all, but
true. Yeah. If you do well, then it wouldn't feel that bad. Well, I would still feel bad.
Let's see. I think the hardest day, like where I just was suffering all day and had to work for it, was probably Dauphiné 2020, the fifth stage.
Yes, my guess is correct.
Yeah, it was just super hot. I mean, I felt really good, but I was suffering absolutely the whole day. And the only nice part of the race was the neutral start, which was downhill. but they didn't even neutralize. Well, they neutralized it fully downhill, and then we stopped at the very bottom, and then went straight into a 3K climb. So that was from then on, it was absolute misery. Yeah.
For those who don't remember that stage, the day before, or maybe 2 days before, Primoz crashed out, Buchmann crashed out. There was a sketchy gravel descent. Like loads of people went down. Maybe even Kreuzweg. I can't remember.
Yeah.
And so GC was completely blown over. Primoz was going to probably walk GC. And so this fifth stage was just it was one of the hardest stages, 155 Ks, Megev to Megev. It had the combination that this year's tour, or last year's tour now, stage 8 had of Rome and Colombière. But instead of being sort of in the last 30 Ks, it was in the first 60, and the race just exploded. I went and look at like the kilojoules in the first 3 hours of that stage. It's just mental. That's why I thought it was the hard. I was hoping you'd say that, because the energy expenditure on that stage is mental. And Danny Martinez ended up winning GC. But yeah, I mean, I hope. I'm not sure if they finish at the Altaport near Megev this year in the tour, but is that? Like, I've got you down for Col du Granon. Is that too early? Is it too early to put you down for a tour stage? Have you looked at the stages in depth and circled any?
No, I've seen that stage. That one looks pretty pretty impressive. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah,
yeah.
I think the one to Megev though, it's like nothing crazy though. So
no,
I don't know.
Yeah, I think you and Lopez for that Granon stage look pretty good. Do you remember that Andorran stage? I remember because it was like I was in the outback in Queensland. There was this hot wind. I never felt it before. This hot wind really up all the way from Spain up to where you guys came in at the French border. When Quintana went to take the Souvenir Henri Desgranges at the top of Port d'Envillard, and by the way, it's a big highway. By European standards, it's a huge road. Were you like, there is no shot he stays away on this descent, 58 kilos, he's going to get caught?
Yeah, no way.
Yeah.
But it was a nice move he made, because he was the only smart one that attacked at the right moment with the wind, and everybody else was flapping around in this because like you said, the wind was, I've never been there with wind that crazy. Yeah.
And that's up where Sepp's lived for a long time, or just above where he's lived for a long time in Andorra. But yeah, Quintana, there was a hairpin. Everyone was in the headwind and then went round, and then you got tailwind for a little bit through this hairpin, and Quintana just launched it. But so Wout brought Quintana back on that really, really fast descent. You're recovering. Who did you think would be the main guys on the climb? I know Alaphilippe had done like a lot of work, and then on Ventoux as well, he sort of faded. Did you know it would be Valverde and Gaudu who'd be the guys to sort of mark early on Bechelis?
Yeah, I think for me, I was thinking Gaudu, because he had a lot of teammates there. They were riding the front the whole time, either to get him back in GC or because he felt good. So I think, he and Valverde for sure were the guys that I was looking at the most. And
coming into Andorra, like the descent, you eventually gapped Valverde, the descent into town. Did you know that well, or is it the fact that it's not like training because they've got the whole roads closed? You can take different lines. I presume it helped to some degree being familiar with it.
Yeah, it definitely helped to know the road. Just in general, if there's anything that's super tricky, but you're right. In training, I'm not really taking any risks, just kind of cruising down, usually still recovering from going up the other side. So it would help me for sure to know it, but either way in a race, when you're going so much faster, it's always going to feel a lot different.
I think one other iconic moment for you this season, which was a nice teammate moment, when Covadonga Roglic is finished, is descending back. Did you two say anything to each other when you you out sprinted the bunch for second on the stage when he descended. Did you say anything or just smile at each other?
No, he was yelling. He was saying,
"Oh, really?
Go, sprint!" Yeah. And I was thinking, well, this is embarrassing because he's probably like, what are these skinny idiots doing sprinting up this hill? I finished 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, that was crazy. That I think he got a lot of stick. I'll admit it. We gave him a lot of stick for the descent attack and the crash. But then on Covadonga, he followed Bernal, and we were like, oh, surprising. But he sort of backed off Bernal a bit. I think that was the best performance of last year, in my mind, in terms of just because that valley, you were in the group with Haig and Movistar chasing. Surely they had some domestics pinning it, chasing after Bernal.
Yeah. I mean, for sure, we went. I think Bahrain was pulling, and we went super, super slow down the descent. So they probably took a minute on the descent, like really. But in the valley we rode pretty fast, but it was so rainy and dicey. I think maybe it was better to be two guys, but for sure they had to put in a huge effort on that valley before the climb, because it's always kind of slightly up,
right?
But I think where the group behind lost it was for sure the descent.
Well, that's what I think. Like, there's a lot of I don't think Master's a good descender. I saw that when he was chasing Roglic and Lopez on that stage 10 World Tour. I actually think Pogacar's not brilliant on the descents. Not brilliant like Basque Country when Roglic gapped him with Gaudu, and then Lombardia, Masnada caught him on the last descent. It looked a bit weird. I reckon that is one place where you guys at the tour can use Jonas and Roglic maybe to try on a descent rather than a climb. Anyway, that's my armchair DSC.
We'll give it a go.
Have you got
to try it somewhere?
As an occasional listener to the podcast, do you have any parting words to us armchair director sportifs that we miss in the hectic mountain stages? That certain things that really influence things, or that we miss, like just maybe the head fog that comes with being 5 hours in, that you can't make decisions properly.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is knowing what's going on for the rider. Like you said, the mental fatigue along with the physical. I think, and a lot of times either way on TV, even if a guy is really suffering, they can still look capable of doing more maybe. And we spend so much time on the bike that maybe we don't look like we're on the limit because we're so into that technique or focus. But it's sometimes hard to make decisions like you would when you're clear headed.
Yeah.
and having more energy. But and also with things like race radios. I mean, most of the time when you're up in the last few K of some monster climb, there's no reception anyways. So you can barely, or their feed of the race is so delayed that they have no idea what's going on. So I think, a lot of the time people think that it's some call from the radio or a bad call from the radio, but a lot of the time it's just up to the rider themselves.
Okay, I'll try and bear it in mind, but I probably will forget when me and Benji drawing diagrams of exactly the game theory of what the rider should have done and what they should have exactly done. I'll bear that in mind. But thanks very much for coming on the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast, Sepp. The best of luck for this season. We already have you penciled for the Granon stage win. You'll take Giro stage win next year. Then you'll have all three, then GC podiums. You've got plenty of time for that.
Yeah, then I can relax.
Yeah, then you complete it.
Thanks a bunch, Patrick. It was really fun.